Hi everyone, it's so good to see you here with me today. Thank you so much for joining me for this session on Learning to Learn as part of the Cambridge Live Experience 2020. I hope you're having a great day with us so far. So let's just get straight into it. I'm sure many of you may already be familiar with Learning to Learn, but don't worry if not, as I'll briefly talk through what it actually is and why it's important for us and the students. But really the main focus of this session is to look at how we can help our learners become more independent. So we'll be looking at what practical things you can do to encourage your learners to take charge of their own learning. For learners to make good progress with their English and with their learning generally, we know that they need to do more than just work through the activities you set for them. But what does it actually mean to do more? So firstly then, what is learning to learn? Well, learning to learn is one of the competencies in the Cambridge Life Competencies framework, which I'm hoping, or I'm sure many of you know about already. And this particular competency aims to encourage learners to learn most effectively and most independently. And you may also have heard of the term learner autonomy, which is really a similar concept. So where learners are able to take control of their own learning and are also able to reflect on their learning too. And Samantha Lewis, among others, have established 3 characteristics in autonomous learners or independent learners. And these really form the basis of the ideas we'll cover in today's session. So what she says about learners is that they should play an active role in their learning. So this means making learning goals that are personal and meaningful to them. So what do they actually want to achieve? Learners should also make decisions about their learning. So this is all about finding learning strategies and techniques that work for them day to day in their learning. How do they actually do the learning? And finally, learners should reflect and evaluate their learning. So reflecting on their achievements. What did they do well? What can they do to improve? What can they do next time? And as I said, for learners to make good progress with English, they need to go beyond completing the activities that they're told to do in lesson time. They need to understand the purpose and the usefulness of their lessons and really see what it means for them. How does it impact on their learning as an individual? And hopefully this leads to them actually wanting to learn. And along with this, they need to learn strategies and behaviours that can help them to become better at learning things more generally. And it's important for learners to develop these strategies and behaviours so they can call upon them and use them to adapt to any changes in their learning environments. And we've definitely seen that this year. And to be able to take advantage of new opportunities when they arise and actually recognise those opportunities when they come about. So we also know that autonomous learners feel more motivated because they can understand why they're learning, they can understand the benefits to them, they can manage their learning better, which will lead to better progress and eventually show improved performance long term. And just to note here actually that it's important at all stages of learning too. Usually only when learners get to secondary school maybe, we expect them to take more control and responsibility for their own learning. But actually we can also help students start developing the foundations of these skills earlier on in primary too. So it does cover the whole education phase and into work as well, really. So now let's look at the 4 ways we can help our learners become more independent. So the first one is all about setting goals. And you may already do all of this in some form or another, which is great, but it's good to be aware of why this is important and what it helps to develop in our learners. And it may sound simple, but ask your learners what they want to achieve. This could be something short term and maybe outside of the classroom. So I want to learn new words to describe a film I watched on Netflix. Or it could be longer term and kind of more education related. So I want to pass my English exams so that I can get into university. And both types of goals are really useful, and it's good to have this mixture. A mixture of short term and long term, as well as for using English inside and outside of the classroom. And perhaps you could do this goal setting collaboratively as a class. You could encourage your learners to add their goals to an online shared document, maybe. So maybe on Google Drive, for example, or on your virtual learning environment, if you have one. An important part of doing this is to regularly reflect on their progress towards these goals that you've set out. And also another important point is that actually this document could be a really great place to give you lots of ideas about how to make the topics and the topics you cover in your lessons really engaging for them too, because you can align those topics and those lesson plans with the goals that they've set out at the beginning. So also along with these larger personalised goals, there are also smaller day-to-day goals that are important. So for example, at the start of each lesson, try describing what you're going to cover, which I'm sure you do already. But alongside this, it's also important to maybe ask your learners what they think this will help them get better at. So if we take, for example, you're doing a lesson on talking to each other about a dream holiday, then you could ask your students, what will this help you be better at? And their answers may be language related, so talking about future plans and intentions, or it could be more skills related, so developing their imagination and creativity. And this will raise awareness of the lesson aims and help them to personalise how this could be useful for them as an individual. And eventually they'll start to do this naturally anyway and understand how each lesson can benefit them and help them towards achieving their own goals. And also these skills that they develop, for example, the developing imagination and creativity, they're also transferable to higher education and work as well. So you can see how developing your imagination, for example, can help with problem solving when you're at work. So they might be able to see, if you encourage them to think about that, they'll eventually be able to see how these skills are really important for developing at this stage in their learning, because it will help them longer term. And finally, the last point here is that it could also be really helpful to turn mistakes that they make into learning objectives. And I'm sure we all know that making mistakes is part of the learning process. We all do it. So encourage learners to take risks, to make these mistakes, and offer them constructive feedback on that as well. And that way, learners can take your feedback into account and plan it into their next learning task. They can make sure that they don't make that same mistake again. What will they do differently next time? And this crosses over with all of the key areas I'll cover today. And as we talk through the ideas, you'll see how all of them overlap with each other. So the second idea then is all about our learners using and trying out different strategies and techniques for learning. You might need to start off by assigning specific learning strategies for your learners to try for different activities in class, like using newer online tools or making mind maps and diagrams to record new language. And there are a whole host of strategies and techniques here. And now that teaching and learning is online, or perhaps even going back into the classroom now, have your students changed how they organise their notes? Have you noticed a difference there? Are they still taking notes on paper even though the class is online, or they're taking notes digitally? Anyway, despite the answer here, the thing that we're trying to get at here is that we want to encourage them to think about what works best for them, especially as they may be transitioning between learning in the classroom and online, or maybe even a mix of the two. So what does it work for them? Does it work writing in a paper notebook while they're learning online? Or do they find it better to, if they're learning online, to use online tools to make their notes? They could try recording short voice notes as well to listen back to, or you could show them how they could categorise vocabulary learning both online, for example, using Cambridge Dictionary, where you can create personalised word lists and quizzes, or offline in more physical vocabulary notebooks. But whatever they choose, it's a good idea to show them different strategies and to talk through the benefits of each one. So for example, there's mind maps, there's tables, word clouds. You can see here in the example on the slide, a student has colour coded the vocabulary, they've separated them out into parts of speech, they've made an attempt to put in pronunciation in there or irregular verb forms, and that's really useful. And you can see that's still on paper, so it's okay that they still want to, if they still want to do that. And so if you vary the techniques that you show them, and as I said, talk through the benefits of each one, learners can eventually choose the techniques and strategies that they have found works best for themselves. And it might be that they choose different strategies for different tasks that you set, but that's good, because they get to work out what works and what doesn't work for them. And being equipped with a variety of study skills and knowing how to use them effectively is crucial. And note-taking isn't the only strategy. This is just an example. Other strategies include creating an effective learning environment without distractions, being able to manage time effectively in order to stay focused and meet deadlines. And in higher education and at work, we can see how these are useful, so that they can spend the time outside of class to work on projects and assignments, or prepare for exams, or continue with their training while they're at work. All of this, you can see how it transfers. And what's important here is that they're aware of the different strategies and trying them out and reflecting on those strategies once they've tried them out as well. And as I said, this links in with everything that we're talking about, and I'll mention reflection later on. So did they think it worked? Did it help them achieve what was set? How was this strategy different to when they used it for a different type of activity? Did they even like using this strategy? And if not, why? Why not? So that's all useful, and that's all there is there about strategy. So let's go on to the next one, which is accountability. So another way to develop independent learners is to encourage them to help each other. And this also helps develop collaboration and communication skills as well. But the focus here in this session is on checking in with one another and making sure that they're on track. And eventually this will help them build their own skills in holding themselves accountable. So making sure that they themselves are on track to complete what they're meant to, and that they're on track and progressing towards their goals. And as I mentioned earlier, this is something that will be useful when they're in work as well. So maybe here you could assign your students study buddies. So this could be someone from their class or from a different class who they can work with virtually or in the classroom if that allows, someone to whom they're accountable. So they could text each other in English, have short video calls, or leave each other voice notes, whatever works for them really. And depending on your learners and depending on what you want to get out of this and what they want to get out of this, this could be related to a particular speaking or writing task that you've set in class or for homework, or it could be to check on how things are going and provide support. Or it could also be related to the goals they set for using English outside of the classroom. So they could talk to each other about what they want to do outside of the classroom and make sure they're doing the things that they set out to. So for example, you can see here on the slide, if they both agreed to watch a YouTube video in English, they're checking in on each other and making sure that they've actually done that, and ask follow-up questions as well. So what did you think about the clip that you watched? And not only that, it's a good chance to also support each other with language skills as well. And you can see that here in the texts on the slide. So students could also hold each other accountable for other things as well. And some of these you may have already heard. So things like switching language on their phones to English, watching films or TV series in English or with English subtitles, or reading books in English, whatever they prefer and whatever they want to do at that particular point. And hopefully doing this, learners will be able to see how they're progressing and realise the enjoyment they get from being able to use English, not just in the classroom, but outside too. And finally then, this idea is all about reflection. And as I said throughout, reflection and evaluation plays a major part in developing autonomous learners and should be done regularly. So for example, you can see here, at the end of each week, you could allow your students time to think about their progress and talk it through with their classmates, and crucially give them the chance to write it down in a dedicated section of their notebooks, whether that's online or in the classroom. And here this is the 3-2-1 reflection method. So this could be three new things that they've learned that week, 2 things they've really enjoyed in their learning that week, and 1 thing they're going to do next. And the second part, actually, 2 things that they enjoyed about learning, is really crucial, because that will hopefully eventually help them, make them see how fun and enjoyable learning English is, and they can see that progression there as well. And the seeing progression is motivating, and that's what we saw at the beginning of the session. And every now and again, actually, if you've got this record, you've got these boxes here, you can check through them, and you can compare how you feel the students are getting on in their English and how they feel they're getting on. And you can use these to modify your lessons to help them work on what they need to do next. You could also help your learners reflect on their learning in a more descriptive way, maybe by encouraging them to keep a learning diary. This could be typed in a document shared with you and the whole class. So it could be a drawing they share and talk about with their classmates or with you, or it could be a video or a podcast they record at the end of each week and send to one of their classmates, their study buddy, or to you. Just something to talk about and reflect on that learning. So it's not, the focus isn't on their language at that point, really, what language they use in their video, but it's just ensuring that they are reflecting and seeing how they're progressing. And what's important is that all of this reflection that they're doing is not just on what they know or the outcome of a task or the score they achieved in a test, but more importantly on how they've been doing, how they got to where they are now. So what strategy or techniques did they use to complete a project or a task? What do they think went well? What didn't go so well? And why didn't it go well? And what could they do differently next time? And all of this reflection can lead them to make changes to their learning goals or preferred strategies if they need to, and eventually lead to them becoming more independent learners, which is what we want here. They're able to see their progress, they can start to see what works, they can see the benefits of what they're doing and become more involved in their own learning, and hopefully really enjoy the process of doing that as well. So all of these ideas will hopefully help build learner autonomy and will help your learners learn to learn. But there are some key considerations that we need to take into account before doing those. And these are really essential. So learners will need a lot of scaffolding and structure from you at the first, because we can't presume that they will know how to do all of this just by you telling them that they've got to do it. You kind of need to scaffold them, you need to walk them through give them examples, give them models of different strategies, different techniques, the reflection method, especially if they're not used to doing this already and it's not part of their learning routine. But as this becomes more familiar to them, you can gradually give them more choice. So you can give them more choice on what strategies they use to complete an activity, or you might give them more choice on how they do that reflection at the end of each week. They might not have to use those boxes, but they can do what works for them. And they can choose how to set their objectives as well and how to reflect on that process. You might also need to have clear methods for how you expect them to reflect on their learning and build this into your routine at the start and end of each week. And as I said, eventually they will start to do this themselves. Also, another key point to remember is that whenever you ask or you tell your students to use a particular technique, always tell them why they're doing that. What's the point of it? What's the benefit to their learning? And this way, as I said, they'll start to understand the strategies and processes that work for them. They'll understand why this is benefiting their learning and benefiting them, and how it helps towards their achieving their goals. By trying out some of these ideas and keeping in mind these considerations here, hopefully you'll be able to see what works with some students and what doesn't with others, and start to see your learners becoming more and more independent and taking more control of their learning. So I'm afraid that's all from me today. I hope you found this session helpful, and I hope you have fun trying out some of the ideas with your students. I know it's very quick, but if you want to find out more, go to the Cambridge Life Competencies Framework page or go to the blog page and search for Learning to Learn. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Cambridge Live experience. Take care.